like I'm 20 again, for goodness sake. I've started my second career.
You know, we hear all these adventures and we love every single one of them, but sometimes you get there and they just resonate that little bit more. Don't know why, they do, right? And Lynn Evans today is one of those. I found it absolutely fascinating listening to her as she wanted to take a creative path. It didn't happen. She took a corporate path with chocolate and then but has now come back to creativity. And we hear these stories time and time again. And this one is as fascinating as all the others. Before we crack on, please do like, subscribe, share and comment. We would love that. Basically, there's no point beating around the bush. And yeah, let's get going as we introduce you to Lynn Evans.
Different.
Yeah. Right, come on then.
You're leading this one.
Why am I leading it?
Start the season and you're more Vavavoomey than me.
Oh, no, it's not. Right, okay. Lynn, welcome along to Digital Circus Life. It's an absolute pleasure having you here today. As always, we're going to start at the very, very beginning, and we're always fascinated by how people answer this. But what is it you are trying to achieve?
Oh, I feel like I'm in one of my interviews when I interview my clients, actually. I guess there's my personal side of life and then work. And I think from a personal point of view, I'm trying to achieve a bit of better balance, really. Right. I spent 20 years working in the corporate world, working at times ridiculous sort of hours. And I've got 3 children and I just was hitting a point where I felt they'll be gone before I know it. And actually, my eldest is going into year 13 today. So there was a big factor around I am trying to just get better quality time in my life with my family. And then from a sort of work point of view, I just felt I was wanting to do something more fulfilling and also something more creative. So I've said I spent 20 years working in the corporate world in sales and marketing roles, which is quite creative, selling food products to the large supermarkets. It's quite cyclical, and there's elements of the role where you can be creative, but quite a lot of it's less creative. And I'd always fancied, I'd set out to do something much more creative. I actually wanted to go into broadcast journalism as a teenager, and my father dissuaded me from doing that. So I think in my new guise, as a writer, writing life stories, I've ticked that box. And I've always felt that I want to do something a bit more purposeful. And I've just recently been made the trustee of a brand new charity called Pectus Matters, which is aiming to support patients who have chest wall deformities, which is a condition I had no idea my own boys had. This is something we found out about in the last 2 years. And so, fulfillment, sort of being purposeful and more creative.
I love.
Right. There's quite a lot there, isn't it? Where do we start?
Well, the first bit. Why did your dad dissuade you from broadcast journalism?
I have got no idea. So my dad was actually the head of careers, the careers service at Aberystwyth University initially, and then ultimately Southampton Uni. And on my 13th birthday, I was always a bit of a performer. I loved being on stage as a kid and I enjoyed writing. He actually got me a day at the BBC TV studios in London.
That's amazing.
I got to watch Going Live with Philip Schofield and Sarah Green, showing my age. Watch them filming Heidi High. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I came back saying, this is what I'm going to do. And as I went higher up in school and it came to sort of deciding on universities, my dad said, oh, well, you can't go and I wouldn't bother going into journalism because it's so competitive. Everybody wants to be in the BBC. And unless you've been to Oxbridge, you're not going to get in. So he kind of quashed, having raised my hopes and got me all excited about this career
Thanks,
route.
Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, he did a great job of dissuading me. And my older sister had gone into business, and I just thought, oh well, that looks quite interesting, and hopefully I'll get a job at the end of it. So that's what took me through that route.
Right. So I'm caught up in you're clearly a creative.
Yeah.
You clearly wanted to explore that, didn't, took the corporate world. But in all fairness, going through your LinkedIn, you were in kind of chocolate and sweets and confectionery, which is, let's be honest, fun. If you're going to be in any part of the like kind of retail food, you might as well be in sweets and chocolate. And then you've gone, actually, I want to go back to the whole creative side, but you've also gone, and I don't disagree with this, you did get a chance to be a bit creative in your corporate world, but ultimately, and I'm no beating around the bush here, you have to sell your soul for it. Yes, you get the wage packet, but they pretty much own you from 5 a.m. till, whatever time you do get to finish. So...
Yeah, and it was quite hard pressure work as well, negotiating your annual plan with the retailers. It was quite stressful at times, could be hugely rewarding, but it's very cyclical. So you go through, even if you move company or move product category, you pretty much go through the same formulaic process every year of presenting your brand plans, getting new product listings, agreeing, promotional spend and investment. And I think I hit a point going, I'm hitting my late 40s here. Is there something else? I don't want to look back and regret that I hadn't scratched that creative itch. And then fate sort of played a role. I was unexpectedly, my role was made redundant right before lockdown. And that lockdown period was just the perfect chance for me to reset, basically. Yeah. And I was fortunate, my company paid for me to have one-to-one career coaching, which was brilliant because I did get a perfect match with a fabulous lady who I opened my heart and soul to her, and she was the one that said, make the change, Lynn, make the change, and it's going to be hard if it's going to be a radical one, but stick with it. And I needed to hear that, and I didn't at that point know what I was going to end up doing. And in a very weird way, the way my life unfolded then over the next year or so has almost shaped the route I've taken. So for sad reasons, my dear dad, late father, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was an amazing man with incredible stories. I mean, we used to love sitting with Dad around the dinner table, getting through copious bottles of wine, and the stories he used to come out with. And, he was this kid who grew up in a very working class terrace street in Port Talbot. His mum sent him for elocution lessons because she thought he didn't talk properly. And the elocution teacher, her husband was the local drama teacher. He ended up in the local drama club with Anthony Hopkins.
Wow.
Sorry, how could I be drinking when you dropped that one? That's awesome.
Well, it was amazing. And, I'll never forget Dad telling me about the fact that his claim to fame was in one production. My dad was the lead role, and Tony Hopkins was the foghorn noise off stage.
That's an unbelievable story, isn't it?
Well, it is. And you know what? My dad claims that he and Tony Hopkins had been the ones who'd been pulled aside as sort of 17-year-olds and told they had it and that they should pursue a career in acting. And my dad was quite risk averse and ended up going into teaching. So maybe it's come full circle. And when it's come back to me in my late 40s, I'm going, well, actually, I am going to go and do that thing I want to do, because you only live one life.
That whole risk averse thing with parents, and you have that that layer above you of telling you what you've already mentioned your dad sort of dissuading you from going into the BBC and stuff like that. Do you, as a parent now, do you think about how you impact your children in that same way?
Yes, absolutely. So I think my boys at the moment, they've both got sort of fairly clear ideas as to what they think they might want to do. And I'm sure that may chop and change. But my daughter, who's the middle one, she's very good at singing and playing her guitar. And she does perform a lot in our local live sessions. And I don't want to push her, but I'm the one encouraging her to say, I can't just pick up a guitar having just heard a song on the radio and knock a song out. That's quite something to be able to do that. And whilst, this is not about you becoming the next Taylor Swift, but you could really turn your hobby into something that can provide you with an income that you love, and, keep all those doors open at this stage in your life. And I suppose we have encouraged her does have singing lessons. We encourage her to go along to some of these open mic sessions, and she loves it. So I am very much more. My eldest son as well, he'll be doing A-levels this year. I'm saying, go and take that gap year. Go and see the world. Go travel, because, you've spent however many years in education, 14 years in education, and if he's planning to go to uni, that's such precious. 1 year of your life, go and see the world. So yeah, I'd like to think I've taken the lessons from my childhood.
And I know that's so clear. Obviously, you said in your late 40s, you decided actually that life's too short and you should be taking that next step. So your current business that you're exploring at the moment started.
Are we moving there?
No, we're not.
Oh, right. I've still got loads of questions.
It started with your dad we start that. We took a segue. So that wasn't actually at the point of you talking to your dad and his stories. That wasn't at the point of you starting that business, was it? But it happened to kind of lead
not
into
quite. And the big moment came when, so I'd captured most of Dad's key memories of his life, the transformative points of his life, and he was simultaneously undergoing chemotherapy, which he seemed to be dealing with quite well, and he'd been on it for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then one Saturday I got a message from my mum to say, bit worried about Dad, he's having deja vu episodes. And she was giving me some odd examples of where he thought he'd seen a woman that he'd always seen at the same corner of the street. He'd watched a game he loved Welsh rugby. It was a live match. Why, I've seen this match before. And we took him to A&E on the Monday. And no word of a lie, he walked in. He was fairly mentally intact. Within about 2 to 3 weeks, he was doubly incontinent. He'd completely lost his mind, highly delusional. It was utterly devastating. And the incredible point for me was I was in hospital with him one day. Actually, sometimes he could be deliriously happy as well, because he thought I was the Prime Minister. He thought he was a global statesperson. It was wild. But this one day he was agitated. And I happened to have the A4 printout sheets of the notes, not any sort of, I hadn't written the book at this point. And I just said, oh, Dad, can I read to you? I was trying to distract him. And I started reading, in his own words, the story of his childhood. And he just became completely lucid. Old Dad appeared in the room and we started having a completely normal two-way conversation, which was something I hadn't had for like 3 weeks. And it was so profound. That's never left me. And that was the seed of the idea for... I wrote his book, which was hugely cathartic in the period that we lost Dad. We sadly lost Dad he was in hospital for 4 months and he died 3 months after coming home. But I then just felt, you know what, I want to be able to do this for others. And I love the challenge of writing and trying to replicate his voice and tell the story and sadly he never got to see his book and see what I'd written. But maybe that's a good thing. He might have told me to make too many changes. You don't know. But Yeah, so that's how I got into it, I guess.
It is right. So, first of all, look, ever so sorry to hear about your dad. These things are never nice, are they? They're really not nice at all. But I just find the creative journey quite interesting. So I get you kind of, it does seem relatively obvious to go from broadcast journaling into writing a book, but I don't think it is that obvious, especially after 20 years in a corporate world. But I have one other quick question before we explore that is, you said you went on Going Live and you met Phil.
Okay,
and
you've gone back to there.
Yeah, no, it's a quick one. Did you meet Gordon the Gopher? Because that's what everyone wants to know, Lynn.
I wasn't actually, I was only watching them recording it. I didn't actually get a seat. Yeah. And it would have been on a Friday. So it was like the pre-recording day. So sadly not.
Right.
So you didn't meet Gordon the Gopher. That's
Well, in that case, you're just not interested.
Well,
you
go
know.
back to the
Right,
serious
anyway.
stuff.
It's like when we went to
Did
this
you
morning.
pick on him because he's yellow? Is that
No.
why you're my...
'Cause
Oh,
Gordon-
okay.
No, I think it's just because Gordon's the cool one.
I
in
used
the
to have a Gordon the
relationship.
Gopher rucksack.
You know, it was all about Gordon the Gopher and Ed the Duck when I was young, you know.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, it
let's
was.
get... it was. Right, so hold on. Creative, because I find, and I've talked about this before, this whole creative thing interesting, because I remember, like, so I now, if creativity is a label, right, I deem myself creative or whatever we're meant to say, but it's not in a traditional kind of art way. But when I was 13 at school in 1992 or something, the only way you were truly creative was in art, and I couldn't draw. So the art teacher said, don't take art, right? It's not a good option for you to take. And to this day, I've gone, actually, I kind of wish I'd sort of seen it through, because I then went into my own sort of version of corporate world, not like yours, and was still had elements. And now I get to do what I want and I love it, right? I get to unleash stupidity. But it's very different. And what I now do did not exist really back then. So for you, when you're exploring broadcast journalism, do you feel this is the right avenue for your creativity, but the ability to do it didn't really exist in the same way back then? So I'm curious as the creative arc in your life.
I think I've thought it through to that extent. So when you say now, are you talking
Just
about
me then?
Are you talking about the writing?
Right?
The writing? No, I didn't link it at all. It's only in hindsight. I've thought about it. I used to get, quite often I used to love reading the Sunday, in the day before kids, really. I'd love reading the Sunday papers. And there was always
You read Sunday papers?
No, God, I haven't done so for donkeys. But I used to love... The back page of the Sunday Times magazine was always a day in the life of, and I used to feel a bit of envy about the writers who, you know, their day starts with a cup of coffee, then they get writing. I think, oh gosh, that's really nice. I'd love to do that. But what I love now is it's sort of, I'm being creative in a bit of a multifaceted way, because I currently do the whole process. So I'm designing the books as well as writing them. I've had to get my head around using graphic design tools and all sorts. But my plan will be in time to also hopefully have a podcast that I can interview people about their lives. And, you know, I feel like I'm on radio right now. It's a lot of fun. So
exactly that, Lynn. I agree.
And people are seeking out, you know, we all know TV as it was, it doesn't exist anymore. My kids never turn on the TV. They're on YouTube, they're on Netflix at best, they're on TikTok. So maybe I have found my route there, just in a quite a different way.
Yeah. Well, so I'm exactly the same. So when I was younger, one of the things I wanted to be was a Radio 1 DJ, right? So I think 18, 19, I wanted to be a Radio 1. I did take action, but I didn't really take action. I actually applied to be on a Radio 1 internship once, but then stopped. Like, I did one thing, right?
You'd have been a great DJ.
Thank you, Lynn. I knew I liked you.
Yeah.
But to be honest, this is what I want to do. I like YouTube and I like this because as you said, we are currently on the radio or recording a TV program or whatever you want to call it, but without having to go through the kind of confines of red tape and whatever else, you know. And I think that's an exciting time to be alive that we're able to do this.
I agree. And you know, I will have the choice over who I bring on. I won't be bound by red tape that I've said the wrong thing and I'm going to end up on the front of the newspapers. So I think I do think it's an exciting time, and it's in my life. It's really weird. I feel I've been on the biggest learning curve in the last couple of years, because even writing a life story, there's quite a process and a technique to it. So I've had to read around. I've done a huge amount of reading on how to tell a good story, and then social media. I mean, I only joined Facebook last year, and it's probably why I'm not particularly good at it. But I'm overcoming that angst and starting to build my confidence a bit more. I need to do it more, but I feel like I'm 20 again, for goodness sake. I've started my second career.
And
it's exciting.
Starting from scratch is really, really tricky. There's lots of things. Like I said, that learning arc is huge. And the amount of effort and energy you put into the business when you start compared to what you're probably doing in your employment, it's probably 10 times more than you were doing in your employed roles, potentially. But it is that exciting because you're doing something for you as well. And that's super exciting. I would love to know. So with your current guys, with the memory shed, so you're taking people's life stories and you're transforming into amazing books for them to have as keepsakes and things like that. What part of that do you love the most? Do you love the creative out of the writing, or is it the interview stage when you're having that two-way conversation with that person?
I actually like all the different elements because they bring something different. So the writing is the real challenge of trying to reflect their authentic tone of voice, but nothing quite beats the interview process. And I do spend a lot of time preparing. So we normally kick off with a planning process where I'm getting to know them. I'll equip them with some prompts before we meet, but I'm sort of trying to map out the skeleton of their life. And then the output from those conversations really tailors the questions that I ask at interview stage. But it's I love the gems that land in that process that perhaps family don't know about. It's possibly stuff they've forgotten about, and it as part of a different conversation, it suddenly comes to light, and it's just hugely rewarding, and it's very emotional. I haven't done a single life story yet to date that hasn't involved moments of sort of laughter and joy, but also tears, and not just clients' tears, but I can find it quite emotional at times as well, because a lot of my clients are more elderly, and you're getting them to reflect on, particularly in those last chapters for maybe family members, what are the key lessons that they'd share. And it's quite profound stuff that comes out sometimes. So I've learned a lot. I've learned. I gave up history, I guess you'd say, in year 9. I never did it for GCSE, but I love the fact through what I do now, I'm learning about periods in history that I wouldn't have known about, and I'm very happy to go and research a bit more to create a better story. It's hugely rewarding.
I love it. Sounds fascinating.
That's practical application. When we always say about the education system, we have lots of thoughts. We've mentioned on many episodes previously about the education system is broken. You don't need that at that particular point. It's now, as you've just said it, when you can apply it in real life to something where it's necessary and it's interesting to you. It's a much better way of kind of applying it to your life. Are you able to compartmentalize? Obviously, you were talking about emotions there, and it is quite heavy in times, and you are carrying a lot of emotions, and it's a massive weight of responsibility because you are that caretaker of those person's memories. Are you able to shut the door on that when you finish with that and sort of leave it to one side and bring it back to your personal life? How do you cope with that?
I'd say most of what I do is all very positive. So it's not like I'm operating on someone and something awful's happened, but it does affect me. I very recently had one of my earliest clients had passed away, and his child, who'd commissioned the book, had been in contact to say thank you so much. and I've worked with them to share some of the recordings and some of the audios that could be played at the funeral. And I really felt absolutely gutted, quite honestly, because you do build a relationship. You know, when you're speaking to these people multiple times, I like to work face to face if I can with people. You become a friend, quite honestly. And but I also felt a real sense of, thank goodness, that family have now got this person's story, and his story was really quite remarkable. And I was able to uncover quite a lot of pieces of information that the family didn't even know about him. So, yeah,
It's
it does make you think. It really does make you think. But yeah, I think just to reiterate, it's not like I'm a doctor, or I'm on the sort of front of a medical line and I've.
I don't think it matters, Lynn. You do what you do, and
we've
it
discussed that
affects
as
you.
well.
It affects you.
Is regardless of the role you play, it can still affect you, and it's no less so important just because you're not a brain surgeon, and that's that's a completely different kind of emotions. But you are in the moment with some really they are precious things. And my grandfather, before he passed away, he actually wrote his own memoirs. He had no issue talking about his stories. He had loads, and he just loved it. And actually, for his 80th birthday, he gifted us all his book. All of his grandchildren had his book. He passed away 6 months later. It's like he already knew. He like, here you go. But I read that back, and I still to this day pick up that book. I mean, it was very gratuitous because he was a very confident man. But yeah, I love because there are things there that I can take down to my children. And he was an incredible entrepreneur, and I went down a very corporate, and I went to university, and I did all the standard thing that you should be doing type thing. And now I'm doing what he's in effect done over the years as well. So I kind of have that extra connection to him now as a grown up, and reading his book back really makes me feel quite content, actually. So what you're doing and helping other people who may not have that ability to write their own stories, I think is a real true gift for that family who will love it for years and years and years and years, and pass that down the generations, because we don't share enough stories.
We don't, and I think that is something I do say to people, and I do try to convey on my social media, is that memories generally last a generation. So I could probably recall many of my dad's, because he used to repeat his stories a little bit as well, although we loved him for it. My kids might remember a couple of them, but their children are not gonna, their children will never have met my dad. But I think, God, wouldn't I have loved to have had a life story book on my grandfather or my great grandfather or mother? It would have been such a wonderful gift. So yeah, I see. And the other thing I do, although I can help someone entirely through the process, I'm working with a few clients who are trying to tackle their own life story, but just want that support at the back end around editing and actually getting it turned into a book as well. And that's just as rewarding, quite honestly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's modern day history books, isn't it? Like when you go back to your time at school in year 9, you learned about the Titanic and you learned about World War II, because they were big life events. These smaller tiny little life events that happen to everyone across the world don't get documented, and then they are just as impactful on someone's future life and how they can live their lives and make different decisions later on. So I think they're so crucial. And in 2024, a lot more people getting cremated, and we don't have headstones these days as much as so there's not that kind of focal point to that person's life, even in the ground. And having that book is just I think it's absolutely magic. And as soon as I heard about your business, I was hooked, and I love following your adventure.
No, it is absolutely fascinating.
I'm curious, just to kind of bring it onto a lifestyle, going back to that personal element of what you're trying to achieve right now, Lynn, you said at the beginning of this, and we were talking pre-record as well, about being present and in the moment for your children. Obviously, we resonate with that a lot as well, with our 3 as well. Have you found, since starting this adventure of being self-employed, you're starting to tip that balance again back into where it should be?
I think I have. I think at time one of the other things I haven't really talked about is the fact I've just helped to set a charity up in the last 12 months. So I think between now between the memory shed and now working as a trustee. So we got it set up. It was May. We finally got the registration through the Charity Commission. It is eating hours. But I wouldn't say I've gone quite back to the hours I used to do. And what I can do now is work truly flexibly. So because my kids are quite often now at the age where they've got homework at the weekend, I might take a few hours out in the week to go and take them to a club or do something with them. But if they've got head down for 2 to 3 hours at a weekend to do homework, well, that might be when I go and do some writing.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm managing it okay. And because I'm loving what I'm doing, it's kind of a positive pressure.
Yes, very much so.
It makes such a difference. And don't get me wrong, there were many moments in my career where I literally loved the role I was in. And I very much saw it as positive pressure. But, nothing can be truly as positive as when you're working with something that you've created yourself. And it's been I'm very grateful I've had this opportunity, I guess.
Yeah.
I get
Do you
that.
think you would have had the time and headspace to set up the charity had you been in your employed world?
No, absolutely no way. And it's funny how it all came about, because I mentioned that was actually a slightly part and parcel of me getting my business going. The two have ended up interweaving at the very beginning, because just before I lost my dad, my eldest son came to me and said, Mum, I think there's something weird going on. I think my chest is caving in. And indeed, I could see he had a concave chest. I thought, my God, I just thought he was a bit skinny. Cutting a long story short, I then realised, comparing him with my youngest son, that his chest was slightly growing out. And all of a sudden, I'm on Mr. Google and I've discovered what I think is this chest wall deformity. Got to speak to a GP who just said, don't worry about it. That nothing, it's cosmetic only, and they may grow out of it. And my head was so full of my dad being so unwell at that point, I just thought, right, we'll park it. But I found a Facebook group about the condition, and I suddenly started to realise, my God, I'm not sure I'm even going to get treatment for my children, because I learned that NHS England had decommissioned treatment in 2019. We did manage to meet up with a wonderful cardiothoracic surgeon who was able to try and help us with some non-surgical treatment, but he was part of a small team lobbying the NHS, and they ended up organising this big event in the Royal College of Surgeons in London in February 2023, and they invited parents along, they invited media, and we'd been invited to a Zoom call about 3 months in advance to have a chat about, well, what's this day going to be about? And I'd already started the process of setting up the memory shed. And I'm hearing these terrible stories of, you imagine, children with a centimetre between their sternum and spine, and the impact that's having on their lungs and heart. Kids having to miss lots of school, being taken around in wheelchairs. And I just thought, we need to write a book. We need to get these stories out there. So
if only she knew anyone who could
no,
write.
I know. I did laugh, but I'm not laughing at this very seriousness of the situation. It's like, we need to write a book. It's like me. We need to do a YouTube video on this, Emily. When you have that skill, you have that skill set, don't you?
Yeah. So I put a post out onto the Facebook group. I thought maybe 5 people will be willing to share their story, and we got 41 stories. The book, we got 100 copies of the book printed. It went all the way around the NHS to all the Royal Surgical Societies, Society of Rare Diseases, the Royal Paediatric Society, and it was quite influential in helping NHS England overturn that decision. And the wonderful group of patients and one of the medical directors I work with, we were the people then that came away and went, God, this is so good. We need to keep this going. And that's kind of how the charities come about. So we've spent the last 18 months now getting the charity up and running, which I'm really excited about.
Power of the pen.
The power of a story.
The pen,
the power of a story. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is cool. Right. I think, okay. So, Lynn, I have one mildly facetious question before we end with a proper question. But look, they say when you podcast, you have to ask the questions that people, are dying to know the answer to. And in my head, this is the question people want to know.
I don't even know what it is, Lynn. So
Well, so you work for some food companies, and I said sweet and confectionery, right?
Yeah.
And included in that is Cadbury's.
Yeah.
Question part 1 is, did you get free chocolate? And part 2 is, are you now sick of chocolate?
Part 2 first, I will never be sick of chocolate. Part 1, yeah, I mean, we used to get product samples. I used to get a site of all the new product launches, and you'd always get a few extra samples. You'd take some to your customer.
That's
you'd always
amazing.
scoot off with a few yourself. But the best thing was the factory shop, and you could go and get like a kilo of buttons for like £1. It was just joy.
Amazing.
Yeah, perk of the job.
Did a chocolate product a new one ever come along and blew your mind and went, this is phenomenal, this is like game changer? Did anything? I now wish we'd explored this earlier.
God, this podcast will never end.
No, after this question, I will do the final question. Was there ever like, wow, this is unbelievable, this chocolate bar? Or sweet.
Do you know what? I guess one of the most innovative things they did, there were lots of variations of Cadbury Dairy Milk, let's be honest. But I do think the Marvellous Creations, which my youngest son absolutely loves now, with a fizzing candy, and it was just a little bit different. Yeah. So I was working there when that got launched, yeah.
That's very
Sorry,
cool.
I've lied. One more chocolate-related question.
Okay.
Cadbury's Dairy Milk or Galaxy?
Clearly gonna be
Cadbury Dairy Milk.
You never know. Right,
Cadbury Dairy Milk.
Okay.
Loyal to the end, but I do love a packet of Maltesers. I can say that now because I don't work for them anymore.
I love Maltesers. Right, okay, final question, Lynn. We've talked a bit about your younger time and everything else, and we always find, as we've always say with this, we love this because we want to explore the life before the business and then a bit about the business because how you got there. But one of the things we're also curious about is if you could go back to your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would you say? What would you say to your younger self?
I would just tell myself to follow my heart and my gut and be led by that and not the head in terms of things like career choices, and rather than doing what might be the logical thing, just go with what feels right in here. And I think that is what I'm trying to encourage my kids to do now. And keep as many doors open for as long as possible before you do start to close things down. That would be the other thing.
It's such a common thread we have in majority of these episodes, and something we are very passionate and believe in as well. It's like, so I was very academic at school, and you get put down a certain path, and this is what you should be doing. You should go to university. And it is only now, in my 40s, and everyone who has these similar conversations.
Sorry, what? You're in your 40s?
I know, I only look 21 with just a little money piece.
Tops.
Is the choice is not when you're 16 or when you're 18. You do not need to know what you're going to do when you're 40 or when you're 18. It's absolutely absurd when you think about it, when you say it out loud now we've all been through it. Stop putting that pressure on yourself as an 18-year-old to know that you want to solve world peace
Absolutely.
or be this or be that. Because everyone has a career change at some point, and they will, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. And it is. It's okay to say, I think that might have been the wrong decision and change course, and maybe I might have changed course a bit earlier had I felt comfortable doing that, but hopefully I'm proof. I turned 50 last December. Hopefully I'm proof that it's never too late.
No way, Lynn, are you 50? 28 tops.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I couldn't not say that to Emily and then not say it to you as well. Look, on that note, I think we are going to call it quits. Thank you, Lynn, so much for joining us. I've loved hearing this.
Yes, incredible.
And thank you for listening, watching, as always. It's a pleasure sharing these adventures with you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye.